Welcome to the Take a Breather podcast with Eric Almeida and Stacy Eric. We are certified emotional freedom technique practitioners, and on this podcast, we discuss how EFT can improve your mental and physical health by bringing real healing to the body and mind. We also interview different types of practitioners on the show to tell us about their methods and how they can facilitate deep healing. Please give us a 5-star review on Apple and like and subscribe us on YouTube. It helps us a lot. And today I'm happy to welcome Beth Pellettieri, certified life coach. She's based in Northampton, Massachusetts. It's nice to have you here, Beth.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be a guest on this beautiful offering to the World Wide Web.
Thank you.
Sure. We're happy to have you as well.
Yes.
So tell our listeners, give us a little bit, who is Beth Pelletieri and what is it that you do as a life coach?
Sure. So that's a broad question.
Yes.
So I used to work so my name is Beth Pelletieri. I'm from BP Coaching, bpcoaching.life. And I work with individuals and businesses who are trying to find clarity on sort of where they're feeling stuck and overwhelmed to create a life that feels good, a life they love. And really, I think of my job as a life coach is just to help people listen to themselves better. There's so much noise in our lives, internet noise, that big long list of responsibilities and shoulds and have to get to this and should get to that. And this is how you market and that's how you market. And it can be really, really overwhelming to hear ourselves think. And so especially for my clients who tend to be caregivers or have done a lot of work on sort of helping others in different ways, it can be really hard to sort of turn that lens inwards and try to grow your own voice and grow your own vision and how you want to show up in your life. And so that's sort of where I take it, and such an honor to get to work with really different types of people on sort of how to be themselves more fully. How can we live bigger in our own existence and really show up for ourselves more fully? So that's sort of the nutshell, if you will, of what I do.
Very cool. So what drew you towards focusing specifically on garnering clarity for your clients?
I'm a Virgo. I have a very organized sort of brain. And I think that clarity was sort of just a byproduct. Like, clarity is a byproduct of listening to ourselves better. So if we are listening to ourselves better and we're getting clear on what we want, the things we don't want become clearer. The things we do want and how we want to get there is also going to become clearer. So, all three of us are business owners. How we're going to grow our businesses, how we're going to work in the healing profession as health and wellness practitioners is all going to be different because we're all different individuals. And so sort of as we listen into ourselves more deeply and how we want to express ourselves, what brings us joy, what feels good, it therefore is just clarity is sort of a byproduct of that. When we're clear on sort of our own vision of our lives, the rest of it can fall into place.
For sure. And I resonate. Yeah. And I resonate with the Virgo-ness as well. Yes. Of the getting caught up. Yeah. Getting caught up with the structure, getting caught up with the lists and the to-dos, and then forgetting to listen to oneself a lot. And so I totally get that.
We're all Virgos here. Is that bizarre?
Oh, really? That's a powerful trio.
So funny.
That is kind of funny.
Yeah. And one of the metaphors I like to think of with sort of life coaching is like closet organization, right? So when we're like trying to clean our closet, it's all very physical, right? We can like try on a pair of pants and see if we like them still, how they fit. Maybe we've sort of outgrown the style or the shape or that just doesn't fit our life anymore. And so it's like a very physical activity of like weeding through your clothes. And we could Marie Kondo our outfits and think of whether they bring us joy. And then when it comes to these like transitional moments in our life, like finding a job or, trying to rebuild a life after a divorce or a separation, it's really hard because it's not physical, right? So some of what I do is just making this sort of mind swirl of how we want to show up and what it looks like into a little bit more of a tangible project so that you can start to see the nuance between that shirt and this shirt, and really feel into what feels good for you so you can sort of pick out the outfits you like.
I love that comparison. That brings it back into the tangible again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Curious, the piece that resonates with me, that pings in my brain is, so I hear you with the Virgo, and it's about organizing, right? So often gaining clarity means needing to organize our own internal thoughts. I'm thinking of the step before that also as Virgos, I think, and as people who are, it's way easier to take care of others rather than ourselves. And we get caught up in being very busy organizing the exteriors of our lives. Do people come to you often, like at the point where they're already ready to do the internal work, or do you often have to, like, is a part of your process is recognizing that that one reason they're not having clarity is they're not doing enough internal organizing, or that they need to turn the lens inward more? I can see people like being like half and half, like, I need to do something different, so I'll go to Beth, and then discover, oh, you want me to organize internally too? Oh, have it be a bit of a epiphany where they either haven't been thinking about their own self-care and haven't been thinking about their internal world, and you have to like, it's kind of, my question's kind of rambling here. I guess I'm wondering where people are.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Like, where are they when they come see you, and how often are you like, no, the internal work is key for all of this, and how you work with that?
So there's, I guess, two parts. One is I've been doing a lot of presentations recently on or workshops on reclaiming joy and self-compassion in every day. And part of the reason I love doing that workshop is because there's so much talk out there about self-care, right? And self-care, right? So like, right, your hobbies, or your, bubble bath, or your yoga video, your meditation, or going for a walk in the woods so there's so many ideas for self-care. And the truth is that if I can carve out, I have, 3 small kids at home, if I can carve out a half an hour for a bubble bath at the end of the day, and I'm beating myself up about the emails I didn't get to, and the, meeting I wish I'd gone differently, or the, this thing I need to figure out for the kids' school, then my bubble bath is not going to be nourishing. I'm going to come out of the bath the same way that I went in, which was stressed out, feeling like I wasn't enough, not getting to the things I wanted to get into. And so one of the tools that I love is talking about self-compassion, because if I can be self-compassionate, not only does the bubble bath completely change, but I don't even need to get to the bubble bath, right? I can be doing the dishes and talking to myself kindly. I can be driving the kids to school and talking to myself kindly. And so it's such a game changer. And then from that place of, honoring that it's been a hard day, and knowing that I've done my best, and trusting in my own self, then if I get to the bubble bath, or if I don't get to the bubble bath, but I light a candle and have a nice cup of tea, I can really start doing those self-care pieces from a place of better knowing, and of like deeper appreciation for how to nourish and take care of myself in those moments. And so I think that there is this beautiful interplay where often we start with the external, right? We start with the must get to the bubble bath, must get on the meditation cushion, must get to the hike. And if we can flip it and start in the internal and then get to the external, we get so much greater benefit out of the steps, because we're just in such a more grounded, more intuitive, and more in response to our own experience in that moment, so that we're not responding to the fact that I have to get to self-care, or I'm going to fail at yet another activity today. Instead, I'm thinking, I'm disappointed that this didn't work out, or I'm exhausted. And then I'm responding to that emotion that I'm having, instead of this sort of like, oh, another thing to do is self-care. So then because I'm going to treat myself differently. If I'm feeling sad, then I might want to curl up in bed and read a book or journal. Or if I'm feeling exhausted, I might just lay on the floor in the darkness and just take a couple deep breaths. So I'm going to self-care differently if I'm in tune with the internal side of things.
That makes a lot of sense, because you are right. The self-care thing is certainly out in the zeitgeist at the moment, but you're also right in regards that it could turn into just another chore. It's like, I'm already having to be the best employee, the best boss, the best spouse, the best parent. And now I have to be the best to myself. And it's like, crap. It's like, I've only got so much time in the day. So
yeah.
Well, you're pointing out a fundamental issue with a issue as in the problem with the perception of self-care that you just, I had never thought of this way before. And there's an opportunity if we start with the internal, because rather than the external, because in fact, doing the yoga, doing the class, doing the hike, it's all these external practices, hoping to make the internal world feel better. Instead, we start with the internal world and it's just flipping the narrative to the self-compassion, starting from self-compassion. And self-compassion may say, I have a lot of things to do. Getting the dishes done is an act of self-care. I want my kitchen to be clean. And like, you can make anything can be an act of self-care at that point.
Right.
And once you recognize that the things that'll make you feel better about your environment or feel better about yourself or feel better about what you've accomplished today. If I send, I have too many things to do, but if sending this one email will feel really good to get that done. And that's suddenly sending an email is self-care.
Yeah, that's so true. And sometimes we bypass what we're actually experiencing in the name of saying, if we get this one thing done, then we'll feel better. So because often,
you're right.
So often as people who are, trying to take care of a family or trying to be good employees at work, we will bypass our own needs in the name of, after this, I'll feel better.
Right.
And that can be, then we're sort of using that as a way not to take care of ourselves again.
Right. Yeah. So it's interesting. So I guess that's where self-analysis really comes in, I assume, with the work that you do with people, is recognizing when people are doing things because they're just trying to, it's the, when I do this, I'll feel better versus doing this makes me feel good, or this feels, it's like a fine line, right? Between, it's like, I'm a little confused about the line, right? Between, if I do this, I'll feel better versus if I do this, I feel I'm giving myself compassion and self-care by doing this thing. If I'm being clear enough myself. Oh, I think we may have lost her.
Beth, are you there? Looks like she froze for a moment, but so she is slowly coming back. But no, I totally hear what you were saying, Stacy.
Yeah, if I'm making sense about it. Yeah, sorry.
Welcome back.
You're back. The joys of the internet.
Like, I'm gonna keep talking because I can't tell if it's frozen and like gonna fix itself or frozen and gonna die.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know if you heard everything I was saying. I'm trying to navigate the difference, right? Like knowing the difference between, I'm doing this email because I'm nourishing something important in myself versus I'm doing this email so that I feel better. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of subtle. It's kind of subtle.
It's very subtle. And normally I think often if we sit with the internal long enough, we will realize that the email is about something else and not about nourishing ourselves. So I think we rush through the internal, which is totally normal, right? We're like a capitalist society, which is based in productivity. I remember actually when I was a brand new mom, my mom got me this book that was called, what was it? Like basically like I wish I remembered the title, like parenting when it looks like you're doing nothing, or like taking care of how parenting, and it was the whole premise of the book was that we're productivity based. And so at the end of the day, you're like, how much did I do? And so when you've been changing diapers, you're like, the only way to report out on how you're taking care of an infant is, I've changed 7 dirty diapers today, right? Like I've nursed 400 million times or whatever. And so I went on one walk. And so I started, a load of laundry and never finished it. So that, like, when we lose access to that productivity language that our society sort of is built on, it sort of impacts our self-esteem and our confidence. And so I think that oftentimes the way that we can be self-compassionate is actually just by slowing the whole train down. And often it's not a task requiring doing that is going to get us back to feeling restored or nourished. It is actually the not doing that is going to help us it's going to feel wicked uncomfortable, but it's actually what's going to get us into a little bit more ease and flow.
For sure.
So it's as much about establishing a habit of doing nothing, and having that doing, and understanding the value of doing the slowness of doing the internal work, and I can see that be all by itself being a thing, to have that be just as productive to do nothing, or to not be in doing mode, but to be in presence or in being mode, and have that be just as valuable. And that's a big paradigm shift.
Yeah. And it's so if I take a personality test on sort of like these different quadrants of the Colby index, I come out as like a very high quick start, which means that if you give me an idea and I like it, I'm going to move really fast on it. And so I think that in addition to being capitalists, some of us are quick starts, which means that we have an idea, we want to make a decision, we want to move forward. And one of the other personality types, for example, is fact finder, the folks who like to research every little detail. And so some of the ways that I find, just personally in trying to practice this idea of being and not doing is actually physically uncomfortable for me. Like I can feel it in my body. There's sort of like, if you imagine that you want to send an email and then you're not doing it, you can feel really like tingly in your body, and in my thighs, I can feel it. And so often I can sort of coach myself around that, which is that I am still doing something, right? I'm still doing something. I'm just doing like nothing at this moment, or I'm going to make a cup of tea, which is doing something, but not doing that thing, and see if that uncomfortableness about not doing kind of abates if I give it a little space by doing a less vigorous activity, I guess. So not responding to the email, making myself a cup of tea, not responding to the email, going to the bathroom or getting a glass of water, not responding to the email, checking on my kids, right? So that we're sort of giving ourselves these sort of these ways of unlearning so that we can tap a little bit more into ourselves. And I think, I don't think it's black and white, right? It's not like external or internal. It's just shifting. It's just including both in the conversation so that we have more information.
No, that is very, very accurate. And you're totally right that it's not utilized enough, especially the internal, that like, if you're trying to plan a new project for work or for home, and maybe you might be mulling it in your mind, but you are working on it. And sometimes we, especially as Americans, we don't acknowledge that internal mental work as it being anything. It's kind of like, well, we didn't write anything down. We didn't make an outline. There's nothing tangible for us to prove that we did something. But it's like, but being there with your own thoughts, and, maybe you're multitasking, or maybe you're going for the walk or having that cup of tea, or just giving yourself that space to just kind of be like, what if this, or how about would that work? And that there is value there, and that, but we as Americans tend to not to see that. We see that as just frivolous.
Yeah, no, I love what you said. I mean, right? Sometimes if we're struggling through something, sometimes the biggest gift we can give ourselves is to give that brain a break and to go for a walk. And then all of a sudden we get the like, oh, aha, this is how I want to handle this. I think and we don't count that as working, but sometimes sometimes we get our best work done when we're not working and instead out for that walk or doing something else. And when I first meet with clients, especially business clients for coaching, I say sort of, where do you want to be in 6 months, which is how long I work with clients for. And then how does that feel? So that we're not just tapping into this external idea of like, I'm going to have, 10 customers or, and I'm going to make this much money, but also when you achieve this sort of dream that you have, how do you feel inside your body? And how do we keep tapping into those feeling states as sort of internal benchmarks for where we're going? The tool actually is called Find the Feeling. It's a Martha Beck tool, who's a very well-published life coach and Harvard PhD. And so Martha Beck, it's her tool with Find the Feeling. And I've bought cars this way. I've looked for homes this way. So I think we are so used to doing goal setting in sort of this very external way, but we can also set internal goals, which is, if I get the car of my dreams, how will I feel? Because then what also happens is it opens us up to new possibilities. If I'm going to feel like I'm in a car and it's going to make me proud and kind of luxurious and fancy, it doesn't have to be a Mercedes, right? It just has to feel that way to me. And so it can create a whole new set of ideas of how we want to feel in our lives, and what those goals will make, what we want to achieve by sort of those external goals.
I love that tool, and I've so many things pinging in my brain about it. I'm guilty of this myself. Of you get an idea in your head of what you want as a goal, and it's based on so many things that have nothing to do with our own personal happiness at all. Or it's about, I need the money, I want to look good in front of my I want to prove something to myself or prove something to my parents, or I want to, my actual goal is to have a house in this area, but doing that thing isn't actually, I don't really care that much about doing that thing. I just think it's a means to an end. And there's just so many things our brain does.
Yeah.
That if we just feel it, or let our bodies feel it, the wisdom is, it's been very clear to me over the years that our mind should be used as one of very many tools at our disposal to make decisions. And it's should not in the hierarchy. And again, is that the mind is the should be the deciding factor. It should be, it's where the decision should come from. It should be the brain, when in fact our heart and our bodies have so much to offer when it comes to making a decision like that.
Absolutely. And our brains are created as predictive organs, right? So that our brains take the data, and there's so much cool neuroscience happened. They take the information and they you're frozen again.
Oh, we can still hear you.
We can hear you actually, just your picture's frozen. Maybe she can't hear us actually.
I think we might have lost her again. But no, she was talking about the neuroscience of it all. And oh, there you are again.
You're back.
Okay. I switched onto my personal hotspot thinking it would help, but maybe, I don't know.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's all good.
Well, you were talking about the science behind it.
Neuroscience.
I was talking, yes. So our brains take the data that our body is processing and then try to predict what's going to happen in the future. So they are really great at predicting. That is their job. Their job is to keep us safe by predicting the future based on the past. And that is great. But it's what's made us, I think it is great because that's why we're still here.
No, it is. No, I'm making that face because I realize that's why we worry. Like that's where worry comes from, is the mind constantly replaying possible scenarios in the future.
Yeah.
Until we get stuck it all in the brain, then of course the brain, it would turn into worry almost. Yeah, that explains a lot actually.
Yeah, so that's a really important skill, but it means that change is incredibly hard, right? Because our body is, and every time we create change, this is also new science, our amygdala gets activated. They used to think it had to do with fight, flight, or freeze. The new research is that actually it's every time your brain's predictions are off and your body needs to absorb new information, that's when your amygdala gets, which is the core of your brain. It's the oldest part of our brains. And so that's why change, right? Doing what we haven't done before, growing in new ways feels inherently uncomfortable and is also tiring, right? So, right, if our body is also trying to stay at homeostasis, like burn as few calories as possible doing anything so that we can also survive. And so these things that we're trying to do, like change and grow and evolve, are taxing on our system and require more self-compassion and also using other tools, right? Our body is much better at picking up a lot more information that can help us make more nuanced decisions or be open to new possibilities that feel good. Because that's, our heart space can sort of let us know what's feeling open and where we're shutting down. And so that's all super powerful because we need to use the different tools at our disposal, our heart with our brains.
No, that's so interesting with the science component of that, because it makes sense evolutionarily,
right?
Where if you developed a pattern of, when this brown bear is chasing me, if I run in this particular direction and climb up this particular thing, I will get away.
Right.
But then a black bear shows up and you repeat that same pattern and it doesn't work. and then you're dead.
Right.
Like you don't reproduce. So like it's that same thing, but with lesser extremes. It's like, it's the same thing like with driving.
Yeah.
If you're an experienced driver, most of it is complete autopilot, and you're actually not using much of your active consciousness, because it's just like, oh, we know what we're doing. But then once something catches you off guard, it's like,
Yeah,
this
right.
happens to me a lot. Like with the three of us being in New England, you're driving on the highway, everything's normal, and then all of a sudden you lose a little bit of control because there's a little bit of black ice. The adrenaline kicks in, and then all of a sudden you're hyper aware, and then you're like, oh shit, at any point I could lose control.
Yeah.
And then you can't go back into that homeostasis of just being like, and just listen to the music or whatever you're doing while you're driving.
Right. And then probably for the next week or so, every time you drive, you're at heightened alert. You're looking for the black ice. You don't know where it is because it's black ice. And so it's totally right. And then, I mean, they even say most car accidents happen when you're like a mile from home, or right? Because that's when you're on that, you're like, I've done the predictive part, probably, comes on in.
No, for sure. You have so many repeat experiences of, I made this turn, I do this here, and everything's fine. And all it takes is that one random instance. Like your guard is down so low because it's like, oh, I'm at the finish line, even though you're not technically there yet. And then all of a sudden, the squirrel juts across the road, and you're like, shit, you either hit the squirrel or you swerve out of the way. And then all of a sudden, like your whole system's off guard. And then you turn into a paranoid squirrel watcher. And it's like, what's going on, and then you can't calm down again.
Yeah. So I think that's a beautiful metaphor too right? So I'm growing a business. I was working in nonprofits for a very long time, which means that everyone's taking care of each other and checking in on each other. And so I started doing workshops for my business. And afterwards I would be looking for the squirrels. Did I do a good job? Was it okay? Do people like it? Is it the right information? Because I'm doing these new things, right? And then we fall into these old patterns that we didn't expect to pop up in that new space, right? So we didn't expect a squirrel there, and now that we think there might be a squirrel, we're worried about the squirrels. And so I know that's where EFT comes in, and it's also where coaching comes in. So how can we train ourselves that it's safe to do workshops? It's safe to get our voices bigger. It's safe to show up for ourselves when we've been sort of taught that we need to take care of other people first.
I've been thinking about something else while you guys were talking. I'm sorry.
I can see your mind was churning.
My brain is whirring and making connections.
You're listening. I have to tell you, Stacy has a very expressive thinking face.
I'm always good. I'm not gonna be able to watch the YouTube channel. So
no,
oh God,
I can't watch. I love it. I love it when people are right. You're being clear about where you are in the conversation. I love it. It's perfect.
Well, I'm just fascinated with all the new research, and I have to say I'm dubious about when the scientists say this is how the brain works, or this is how we are, and because of neuroplasticity, which seems, it's like often scientists saying, okay, so the amygdala sees change, it's automatically fired up, right? And I don't know, and I always wonder, is that cultural conditioning or is that actually biological? Because here's what I was thinking about. It was my brain was where my thinking face was going. So I don't know if you've read any Dan Siegel. He's a neuroscientist who wrote Mindstorm, and and he also wrote Brainstorm, which is specifically about the teenage brain. And it's a brilliant book because there's so many stereotypes we think of for teenagers that they're disparaged for. Being impulsive, or not thinking about the future, or taking risks, or when in fact the brains are made for that. Like and I'm wondering, now that you say that about the amygdala, if the teenage brain specifically does not have a strong amygdala response to change, that they like change, and it was because a species needs that, right? Like it's good for some portion of our population, of our tribe back in 10,000 years ago, to be like, hey, let's go explore that new place. It'll be fine. Hey, I'm going to go talk to that person that there's a new tribe over there. I want to go see what they have, hopefully they won't kill me. Like there's the impulse to really to be pushing the boundaries is good for health and survival of a tribe. So what I'm wondering is if the teenagers were encouraged to do that, and kept, it's like anything else. Like if they were encouraged to keep that up, and would our brains get quite so calcified and being fearful of change? Because I know the adults in my life when I was an adult or a teenager tended to be like, don't take risks, go to a good college. The children of baby boomers. So I got you got to do well in school and go to a good college and get a good job and do the job for 40 years and get a good pension and buy a house and buy a car. And there was a very set, this is what's safe, do this. And I was not encouraged to explore at all. And there's a lot of conservatism from the older generations to be as safe as possible. We're worried for our children. And so I wonder how many generations have been trained away from their interests, how much of the amygdala is, I'm not saying it's not a biological thing, but would our fear of change and the amygdala reaction be so strong if we were encouraged to be exploring, like, go travel the world if every teenager got to go travel the world, and if we'd be less reactive to change, if it was it's something our brains could actually, and that as adults, same thing, we can actually train ourselves out of having such a strong amygdala reaction to change, so that we're more willing to be.
So our amygdala is not having a strong reaction. So what what the research that I was quoting was from Lisa Feldman Barrett, and she has a couple books on sort of emotions in the brain, but has a new one called 7.5 Lessons About the Brain. And her work is really interesting. So for a very long time, including Martha Beck, who I trained under, there was a lot of talk about this idea that our amygdala was a lizard brain. And all of that research is now debunked, that is sort of old, that's old thinking about the brain. Our amygdala is not highly activated by change, but it is activated. And it looked a little different in different people across cultures. They did, CAT scans or whatever they do. I am not a scientist, so I'm not going to pretend to fully understand. And this was in adult brains. So separately from that, though, there is a fair amount of research, and I'm not going to use the word tribes because there's a lot of tribes that still exist, and I want to be, we're talking about groups of belonging.
And I apologize if I use the word improperly.
Okay, I just want to be sensitive to using it. So in sort of groups of belonging have different cultural norms and traditions. And so in some groups of belonging, taking risks is actually part of their ethos, if you will. Right? So you could think of probably families or friends you have, and they feel really comfortable, skiing, I don't know, big skiing trips or whatever. And you might know other people who have other ethos. And so when we go outside of our community of belonging in how we behave or how we want to act, that there are three main emotions that come up. We feel abandoned, we feel betrayed, and we feel shame. And so that those are what actually is trying to keep us safe. And so when we're growing our sense of self, and that work there's a book by Mario Martinez. He talks about that. I can try to I'll get you the names of these, Eric, for the show notes.
Yeah, that's fine.
He talks about this, and Martha Beck actually has a new book coming out in April called The Way of Integrity, and she's also looking at some of that research. And that has to do more with sort of what we feel when we go outside of our own community of belonging. And so in every community of belonging of your own family system, what that looks like and is going to be a little bit different because there's sort of different rules. So I think that, and we can also have neuroplasticity. Our brains are able to adapt to change. It's just often, I think we forget that when we adapt to change, when we're going against what we were taught, when we're trying new things, that is a process. We want the new job, we want our business to grow, and we have all these expectations for ourselves. And then when it gets hard, we think we're failing, we're doing it wrong. If I knew how to post on Instagram, I would have 100 million followers. If I knew how to, get the bigger house that I wanted, I would figure it out. And so we think that the problem is our personal responsibility. And so when we can put in self-compassion, when we know that our brain is working really hard to change, when we understand that, we're going to create some friction with people in our lives because they're not going to understand what we're doing, we can be more confident in our own voice. We can think that we're doing it right instead of wrong. And we can offer ourselves that internal goal of self-compassion, of being kind to ourselves, of listening to ourselves anyway, and of taking really small steps, because we don't have to take the big leaps. The big leaps are going to feel often really uncomfortable.
No,
Did that answer your question, Stacy? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and it's actually, that's just so brilliant to hear for my own sake, that, you know, those abandonment, betrayal, and shame are some pretty bloody, powerful emotions that are going to restrict any risk-taking behaviors at all. I mean, those are like some of the worst emotions we have no interest in feeling if we can possibly help it. So knowing that there's sort of this I hate to say the word biological, but we have a response to not exit or betray our family group or our belonging group, as you say. And if we do, we may well have these emotions come up, to know that they're based in something other than my self-worth. You know, I'm not feeling this way because there's something wrong with me. I'm feeling this way because it's how my body's reacting to the situation, and it's a natural response. And so, I mean, so much of EFT and therapy is sort of having the self, like the unblending from the body reaction, right? Kind of like being able to see the self, like having the self, capital S, be able to sort of witness what's happening in the body and take a step back a little bit and say, oh, look how, I mean, that's the key to having power with oneself, right? Is being able to step back from the overwhelm and be compassionate and open to what's happening, and be able to and make a choice, not based in those overwhelming feelings, but based on what the self actually wants, and then finding ways to be compassionate with oneself and do the self-care necessary to help those feelings not be so intense.
Yeah, absolutely. And to talk to a therapist or a coach or an EFT practitioner so that you can get the support. I mean, one of the hardest things about shame is that it's actually really hard to lift on your own, right? Because because it is coming from someone else. It's this idea that you should have known something that you didn't know and you've really messed it up. It's really hard to get around that often by yourself. And so it's much easier for us to access support, whether it's paid support or a friend support or something like that, when we can sort of see those, know that we're experiencing those emotions, and access that big S self in a way that can help us get the support we need to sort of tend to ourselves in that way. So yeah, definitely.
And that's a big thing as well. You know, the deviating from one's own group, whatever the group is, whether it's family or cultural or whatever, you know, deviating from that, you know, primordially is dangerous. You know, it goes back to, you know, our tribal nature, you know, historically, where if your group kicked you out, you were dead. You could not survive without being part of the bigger group. And that, you know, and that group could be, you know, in contemporary times, that group could be your family, that group could be your friends, that group could be your immediate community. And so when it comes to being more unconventional or more bold or more experimental, you are going against the grain. But we need that because we need to explore those unknown spaces in hopes of finding something valuable to bring back to the collective again. But a lot of times you're going to go out and explore and be like, well, I went this way and there ain't nothing here. And so it's like, oh, well, I tried. But yeah, it's the shame component makes a lot of sense, that like you're turning your back on your group to go in a direction that has never been gone down before. And even though you may bring back a benefit to the group, there are going to be those in the group who are kind of like, what the hell is this person doing? They're an idiot. Yeah. Like, you know, you don't go into caves hunting for things. Like you hunt in the forest. And it's like, well, in this cave, I found a whole bunch of mushrooms, but one of these caves, you might find a bear too. And so like, there's like the cost benefit analysis, blah, blah, blah kind of component of that too, which is quite interesting.
And right, it's all our personal, right? So for other people, starting a business would not feel like they were going to look for a cave, or getting divorced would feel not, you know, so far. And for someone else, it could feel like, you know, they were moving to the moon. So it's really about our own sort of sort of what we were raised with, what we're experiencing, what maybe our past lives have experienced, and how we're trying to heal in this lifetime, and where we're trying to show up for ourselves more and feeling that tension. Because right, there's things we can do where we're growing and we don't feel it. Right, we can get that new job or whatever, we're like, oh yeah, here we go, doing the thing. And then there's other things where it could even feel like a small thing, and we're suddenly being like, am I really looking for a cave? Why can everyone else look for caves and I can't seem to do it? And it's just that we have different upbringings and beliefs about what, and thoughts and stories about what that particular cave is. I don't know if we're getting too metaphorical.
But no, you're totally right. If an individual comes from a family who is very entrepreneurial, then they themselves being entrepreneurial isn't as risky. Right. And they have generational experience that they can tap into, and lessons that have been learned from their ancestors or from their family and things like that.
And they don't need to be worried about being rejected by their family.
Exactly, because their family has done.
Yeah, they don't
the
need to worry about abandonment
or betrayal. And got health insurance and has a pension, then it's going to feel crazy that you would abandon all of that, right? And take this huge risk on yourself and not work within a bigger company, right? So totally.
Absolutely. And there's so many examples of that. Going back to the divorce example that you gave, Beth, if someone is a product of divorce, they may not see divorce as this end of the world thing compared to someone coming from a product of a marriage that has been sustained for 50 plus years. Like right. You're coming from a very different dynamic of and that could just be experience from the family. That could be cultural as well, where some cultures are kind of like, who gives a shit if you get divorced? Your personal happiness and safety is more important. In other cultures, it's kind of like, no. You get married once and then you don't leave until someone's dead.
You stick it out.
Yeah, you stick it out. And so, each person comes with their different kind of information that they've been taught or have inherited, and then have to go from there. And then if they're deviating from that internal script that they were given, it can create that dissonance within themselves and create the shame or the betrayal or the, oh God, what was the third one? Abandonment. Thank you. Yes. So
no, totally. Sure. And I think what's so tricky about it too, right, is to go back to my closet analogy, is that often we don't even know that those are the scripts, the internal scripts we're running. And so working with someone or having someone support you in sort of being able to pull out the scripts and being like, oh, this is why this thing is so hard, is because I feel like, I'm going back to this, thing is very challenging. And so it's really can be helpful to have someone be like, here is the script. Is it true? Is it not true? How does it make you feel to believe that? How do you know that it's true? And really start to help you pull the thread so that you can wiggle those thoughts, wiggle those scripts, and open to some new opportunities and vision.
Well, that's one reason it makes sense biologically for the teenagers, if they are in fact the ones who are feel less threatened by change or by exploring, by trying new things. I mean, it's not just an opportunity for the family group or for the teenager to learn more, but I'm realizing anyone who never examined the scripts, or never had the opportunity to examine the scripts. It's pretty easy. I think, particularly in the United States, since I think of the United States as being a little more insular. We don't have other countries and languages right next door. In New England, we've got French a little ways away, but and there's certainly other languages spoken in our country. But as far as, it's pretty easy to remain in an enclave where you're very insular, and so it's easy to think the scripts are truth, capital T. And that's why, I love the practices, I think it's in Australia, where the kids do a walkabout, where they just spend some period of time traveling the world and finding out that there's lots of scripts, and yours isn't capital T truth. And once you know that your script in your head isn't in fact capital T truth, then you can actually choose, rather than reacting to your script and thinking that's just how things are. Then you get to choose whether you like your script anymore. And that's what the internal work that you do with coaching or the EFT is uncovering, not just it's discovering the scripts and then even seeing if they're serving us anymore. Like abandon, how many of those scripts can we abandon? And we think it's us and who we are when it's actually an externally produced patina over who we are.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think is most powerful, it's actually really hard to let go of scripts when we don't know sort of what we're aiming for.
Yeah.
And so as, you know, when I work with folks, trying to like be your own CEO and what do you want? Because often when we get clear on our vision of how we want to live our life, what are our values, how do we want to show up in the world, it gets much easier to let go of some of the scripts that aren't serving us because we know what is serving us. I think it's, you know, all this idea of letting go, we have to do it on our own time and when we're ready for it, and as it's presented to us. And so I think that like I had, you know, for example, a while ago, I had like been like, okay, I'm going to tackle my money beliefs. And, you know, and I read some books and I was like, okay, I think I did it, but nothing's really changed. And so I wasn't ready. I wasn't in a place to be clear about my relationship with money and what I wanted money for and how it could help me sort of live my life differently. And right, we get like very polar about money. Either you have no, you know, there's no money or there's luxury money, and most of us just, you know, anyway, there's a lot of whatever. So now I'm in a different position. And so I've been doing the money work again, and all these beliefs are coming up and I'm getting clear about how I want to work with money and how I want to build a relationship with money in my life. And because it's of service of, you know, my light and how I want to show up for myself. And so I think oftentimes we want to let go of things, but we haven't cleared out like why we're doing it and where we want to go. And, you know, we don't want this. And I think that's where a lot of clients come in through the door, which is like, I don't want this job, right? I know that this job is not making me happy, but I don't know what I want. I've applied for lots of stuff. It's all over the place. I don't know, you know, and so, you know, it really makes a big difference when we get clear on what we want and how we want to feel and what's important to us. Is it 9 to 5, or is it being able to travel, or is it the paycheck, or is it stability, or is it excitement? Why do you want a new job? What's your vision for it? And then it gets much easier to see where the pieces fall and what you're still holding on to.
And to bring the conversation back full circle to the original topic of self-care. I mean, so often I have people who I see for EFT and as massage therapy, who they're just exhausted. Like they don't want this job anymore because they don't want that job. Like they just want it to stop. They just want less of their lives taken up with this, and they don't know what they want because they don't have the energy to think about it, or they're just maintaining the life they have and don't have the energy to even think about where they want to go.
Yeah.
And choosing self-care is often the first step in making the changes that they want for themselves, because then they have the space and energy to think about it and to, you know, be present with their bodies and be present with their desires beyond wanting a vacation.
Yeah, no, I totally think that that's true. Oftentimes the first step is just giving yourself more space to feel nourished and taken care of. And yeah, I have a client who's a essential worker, and we did this tool. It's called the Ideal Day tool, and a lot of her ideal day was just resting, you know. And so really believing the power of rest, or of not doing.
I get it.
Or nourishing, right? Just like eating good foods and sitting in the sun. Now that it's here.
Yeah, my go-to is sitting around reading crap fiction. I'll do that for 5 hours, and that's how I recharge. Is I do as little as possible, and that's, you know, because it's also about it's again the self-awareness of knowing, you know, what works, you know, what in fact makes you feel at the end of the day like, okay, I can go back to work tomorrow, and I'm kind of excited to go back to work tomorrow because I've been sitting around for 10 hours and now I feel great. You know, that's
yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
But it is so interesting as well, where it's like there's always this like give and take of, you know, what of the existing script that I'm living by still serves me, and what new thing should I start deviating into to start to rewrite the script. And it's really interesting where at least from my perspective in the zeitgeist, there's a lot of talk of dismantling, but not enough of the counterbalance of the building.
Yeah.
And like,
yeah, absolutely.
And one thing I certainly have noticed, at least in my own life, is that if you dismantle too far, if you are, like you have the job that it's like, I know I don't want this anymore, but then you walk away from it, but you don't have the next thing to walk into. And now you're out in the wilderness of infinite options, but then infinite choice. Holy crap. Like you're lost because you've left what you're comfortable with. You're left with what you're familiar with, but you have no idea where you're going. And then you're out in the wind.
And it's a challenge in today's culture to find a halfway point where you can give yourself, stay in the world, in the reality that's at least paying the bills and serving you in these ways, and then but back off enough. I guess that's where you would come in, Beth. Really, is like you're the space eked out each day to transition more seamlessly between, because I got to be honest, I did the horribly uncomfortable, like I got laid off from a job when I was a teacher. I got laid off and I was just home for 6 months, and knowing I didn't want to go back to teaching and not having any idea what to do next. And that was the most uncomfortable 6 months of my life.
Yeah.
And I didn't actually even know about coaching at the time. I just was sort of flailing about, and it's so, there were lessons to be learned from the experience, but it was not my first choice. Of how to transition out of teaching and into my current career by any means. I see you being the perfect like segue between the known and the unknown.
Because I think often we think that is, I mean, getting laid off, of course, is a different ballgame, but I have a friend of mine in the coaching, one of my closest friends in the coaching program, fell in love with coaching right away and had a job that was very 9 to 5 and businessy. And at one of our classes, she said, I think I'm going to quit my job and just start being a coach. And we both were like waiting for the teacher to be like, yeah, do it. And the teacher was like, don't do it. Like, you're not done with that job yet. You're not here enough in the coaching, right? We want to and I think it's almost that urge to be like, okay, external world, if I'm like, quit my job, I'm going to like jumpstart into the next thing much faster. And the truth is it is those steps. And when we jump too fast, we lose access to laying a good foundation. Right? So if we're jumping too fast from one thing to the next, we're desperate, we want any client we can get or whatever, and we're then not getting to discover our niche, hearing our own voice in the work that we're doing, thinking about our price point from a place of like kindness and strategy and business sense. And so the requirement is the overlap between the two, and then the slow pulling apart as we're ready to take bigger and bigger steps. And that's why I think the visioning part is so important, because then when you vision what you want, then part of that is creating limits. Where are we letting go? Part of that is taking some action steps in the real world. And then part of that is building in self-compassion and play and rest. So it's all of those things. Then we get to sort of our ingredients in our soup.
Well, and as the three of us being entrepreneurs, we all know, if someone takes the leap too soon, and then there's that level of desperation as they're building the new thing. We all I'm sure know, if we as entrepreneurs are too desperate, it is just poison when it comes to attracting clients. Clients immediately sense like, oh my, like, whoa, like this person wants me to hire them for whatever reason. Wait, like this, it's too strong. And then they're like, nope, this is weird. So it's no different than like, it's very similar to almost like a person who wants to be in a relationship really bad, where they're coming on way too strong, and then they just scare everyone away because they're just kind of like calm down.
And you're not being right. You're trying to get clients for yourself, and especially in the health and wellness field, like we want to be. I offer a free introductory session for anyone. It's no strings attached, and part of the reason I always say the no strings attached part is you are on your healing journey. I want you to be in charge of what feels good. Like, right? I want you to be in tune with if I'm the right fit for you and if you're the right fit for me. And so I don't want to do that from a place of clinginess or of, you must pay, like hire me right away. And I've even had clients who have gotten, emotional or brought some stuff up. And then they're like, I want to hire you. And I'm always like, I would love to work with you. And I want you to sleep on it, because because that's not the place, like that is not where I want you to hire me from. I want you to hire me because you're feeling safe and in tune with what is good for you. You know, just because I think that that's important. That's the values I want to espouse in my business, and how I work with people.
Which is an awesome value system to put out into the world, because there are plenty of people, regardless of the field, who just want the dollars and then don't really care about the client per se. Like I even remember, I'm curious, Stacy, if you recall this, I even remember when we were trained in EFT, one of the things that our trainers mentioned to us was don't chase a client.
Yeah.
That it doesn't work, because they'll just keep running from you. Like, you know, especially with, all three of us are in mental health in our own capacities. And we've said this a couple of times, like everyone's mental health journey is their own. And like, we can't pull them out of the water to hop into the boat with us as the fishermen. It's like, we just got to wait for them to hop on their own. Like we can't pull them out. Otherwise they will fight tooth and nail. Like it's, you know, how many times have we encouraged someone that we care about to do something that we know will make their lives better, and they just resist? It's the same thing with clients. Like it's the whole horse to water kind of thing.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh no, and especially I think with coaching, I've had a few different coaches, business coaches and life coaches, before in this sort of process. And one of my business coach right now that I love, one of the things that I've really noticed is that because she's really, clean on sort of why she's showing up, is that all of my business successes feel like mine. So I adore my business coach. I would recommend her to anyone. And I feel so empowered in what's happened and what's taken place in my business since I started working with her. And I think when the coach or the healer is hungry, or is sort of doing it for not sort of clean on themselves, oftentimes you think about them like they got me through this, or they did this for me, and that's actually not the energy, right? We want to leave our clients with. I did this for me. This came from my inner self. This is my capital S showing up in the world in a bold way. And I think that that's such a magical space to be in, where you're taking ownership of what you've created, instead of thinking that it was the practitioner you worked with. Not that they're still your guide, and your part of your tool belt, but just not giving them so much power, especially when we're talking with people who are used to people pleasing or trying to make sure everyone else is safe. When they can feel that in their own bodies, it makes such a difference in sort of what you're able to build and that foundation that you're creating for your life.
Absolutely. Because it's, us as practitioners and life coach and everything like that, like we don't want our clients to be dependent upon us indefinitely. Like we are way stations for them in a way. Like we are just their guides, and they use us for as long as they need. And the hope being that they walk away better off than they were, but they are stronger on their own, and so in that regard, instead of it turning into a perpetual dependency, which, unfortunately, creating dependency relationships with clients is great financially, but it's terrible when it comes to the emotional connection of both parties, because then it's
ethically really icky.
It's ethically bad.
And it doesn't feel clean as a practitioner, right?
No.
You just feel sticky.
Yeah. And it turns almost into like it can even get almost cult-like, where like you need the leader to continue forward. Otherwise you're just lost. And it's like, no. It's like, no, that's not and the three of us here, that's not our intention. It's like, we're here, as guides for those who are looking for someone like us to help them. And then people use us for as long as it is, whether it's one session or for years. And then they continue on, stronger and bolder and braver and more determined, with more clarity than they were before. But it's generated from within them. It's internalized. It comes from within them, and we just help bringing out of them.
Yeah, right. I loved your way station idea. Really, stops on a race.
Yeah.
On a marathon.
And
absolutely,
it's a paradigm shift. I mean, we've talked about this multiple times as far as holistic medicine goes. It's the same principle / paradigm shift that is true of holistic medicine, where when it comes to the body or the heart or the mind, the person themselves is the foremost expert. They're the ones who should be in charge, and everyone else is a facilitator, a collaborator, a support, be it in massage or be it acupuncture. It's working with it's enhancing and encouraging the person's own healing response, their own internal work to create the results that they are looking for themselves, and knowing that they are an instrumental, necessary part of the process. And it's not, it's, as you say, not someone bestowing wisdom upon you. It's you finding your own wisdom and having support in that journey.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
So Beth, you mentioned it briefly before, but what is the typical, when do they go off onto your way station? Like in that regard, like when in a person's life would you be the best fit for them in those transitionary periods?
Question. I mean, I think when you feel like you can't hear yourself think, you're not sure on that next right step, and you feel muddied, either because you're getting too many different people's opinions, or because there's just too many options, or you don't know what the next right step is, and you feel scared and overwhelmed by what's in front of you. So I have clients see me because they've been in a job search for a while and they can't seem to sort of get out of the searching, or they've started a job search and then stopped it. I've had clients see me who are trying to build a business either from the beginning, or their business is growing and now they're trying to create some structure to it and some support so that it can grow, right? And big life changes, like I have one client who is divorced, who is trying to sort of vision her new life. And I have another client who is in the process, very early stages of figuring out a separation, and she just needs a place to hear herself think. She's also seeing a therapist. Oftentimes my clients will be seeing a therapist, and the therapist, I think of, does sort of the excavating, and I do the construction. Nice. And so sort of that those two pieces go together, which is, there is those sort of scripts that maybe need shifting, but I need help figuring out what my house looks like. I'm growing my business and I've seen some models. I don't like them. I'm trying to figure out what growing my business means for me, or a job search. What does that mean for me? How do I want to do it? I've done it before and it hasn't gotten me happier. And so how do I want to do it differently? But in general, most of my clients are feeling overwhelmed and need a place to hear themselves think, feel success so they can build on that success, and create more action steps in their life to create a life that feels good and makes them happy.
Awesome.
And I usually work with clients for 6-month chunks because I find that sort of the pivot that you need to think about it differently and to take some action. And I meet with them twice a month.
So
that makes a lot of sense.
Are you currently online working with your clients?
Yeah, I work online. I used to do some in person, but I obviously have not been doing that. But I do it over Zoom or by phone. So I have some clients who prefer the phone right now because we're doing so much screen time on Zoom, and other people like to see faces. So so the client gets to pick. And I offer a free introductory session with no strings attached, as I mentioned. You can schedule it really easily on my website, which is www.bpcoaching.life. So those are the details.
Awesome. And we'll certainly put those details into the show notes as well.
Thank you.
And this has been great.
Yes.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, and thank you for joining us.
I'd like to just mention, I also run it's called Getting Self-Care Off Your To-Do List. And it's a parenting group through It Takes a Village, which is an awesome local nonprofit that supports families primarily in the hill towns, but the support groups are virtual and open to anyone. And that's the first and third Tuesday of the night. First and third Tuesday of the month at night at 7:30. But anyone's welcome, no matter the age of your children, you're welcome to drop in. So
nice.
It's free.
So beautiful. So before we let you go, any last words of wisdom?
I think so we covered so much. I'm trying to figure out what the beautiful synopsis is. I think I just would like to encourage people to trust themselves. I think when we self-care, we think we could have done more. When we are trying to create change, we think it should have gone better. There's a lot of shoulds that pop in there. And often you're right on the right track. You're already your best self. you're already doing the things you need to do. If you're listening to this podcast, you're already thinking about how you want to take care of yourself. You're already engaging with some of these topics. And so I just would really encourage everyone to trust themselves, because you are your greatest advocate and best source of wisdom.
That was
Lovely.
Beautiful. Lovely.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much for being here with us today. It was really a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was such an honor to be invited.
And listeners, we will put all of Beth's contact information into the show notes so you can connect with her if you're interested in utilizing her life coaching services. I highly recommend. I've done a discovery session with Beth. It was fantastic. So I highly recommend it for anyone who's interested. And yes, thank you so much for watching and or listening. And we look forward to being with you guys again next week.